Hello, everyone, once again. Thanks for joining our webinar. My name is Marta Sulkiewicz. I'm the VP Global Research Solution at Similarweb, and I have super exciting job because I can spot all the newest consumer trends using the most granular, the best digital data in the world, which is Similarweb, of course. So I can go really, really deep. So for any data and consumer trends geek like myself, it's really the most amazing job. And today I will be speaking how we could really capitalize on these micro consumer trends, how we could spot the demand, how we could size it and decide whenever it makes sense to invest into that. And as you can see on the screen, it's from the Makeup Dupes to mushroom coffee. So you might ask yourself, why the dupes? What is the dupes? What is the mushroom coffee? So I will be speaking about it very soon. But why we are speaking about so niche trends is because brands are constantly being disrupted, and the digital disruption usually happens in the long tail. The shell is infinitive. The number of new brands popping up, seems to never end. And also there are new players coming from China, disrupting the market, also taking the advantage of consumers' price sensitivity, and not even mentioning the private labels or other issues that brands are facing at the moment. So we need to really understand the micro trends, but to organize the big noise of digital data, we need to connect them to the macro trends. So just it would all make sense. But macro trends are, of course, well known. I believe you're attending all the global conferences, you're downloading the reports, you know all about the cost of living crisis, about the sustainability, about the new trends around Generation Z or the Generation Alpha. And this is something you probably heard a lot. So there is inflation, price sensitivity, lipstick effect. So premium goods are being sold quite well, while the low end is being disrupted by the Chinese brands. With the sustainability, all the customers are still thinking about environmental concerns. They do think about it because we had so many heat waves this summer all around the world. And last but not least, the Generation Z and Alpha, they would adopt all the innovations and new trends so fast, operating in digital economy and having on-demand mindset. So even if we think about these three macro trends, it's already quite a challenging place. But the question is, how do we measure even these big, well-known trends? It's usually by asking questions, by surveys. And when it comes to the cost of living crisis, the question is, will consumers share their financial problems when answering the survey? When it comes to sustainability, what if consumers cannot really afford organic products? They will still claim that they want sustainable choices, but the real measured behavior is going to be totally different. And when it comes to the Generation Z or Generation Alpha, how often do you really need to survey them to spot all the new trends? They're popping up like every day. So the question is how to address the say-do gap, how to bridge the gap between declarative behaviors and the real behaviors, and how to go from this macro level to the micro level. You probably might be aware about on the Everybody Lies book, published already a couple of years ago. There are many more books which are speaking about behavioral data and how it should be interpret and what are the differences between the status claimed and real behavior. So this is, if you haven't read this one, I would recommend you to do. So going more to the specific examples, how can you really uncover the opportunities that are under the radar, so on the micro level, and capitalize these niche trends, and how you can connect them to the real behaviors, to the micro level, to understand the monetization potential and linked with your wider company strategy. This is what I would like to focus on, taking two examples. One would come from the coffee category. From the macro view, we know there was COVID, and COVID significantly changed the coffee consumption behaviors because, first of all, anybody who used to consume coffee in the office right now was locked, or in the coffee shop was locked at home. So there were a lot of searches we could observe, as well as the purchases in the marketplaces around the single serve cups for the customers who really didn't want to invest more into the bigger machines or invest a lot of time in preparing the coffee. That was like a big trend in the US. When we were comparing it to Europe, that was totally different because people in Europe were looking more for the grain, coffee grains, coffee beans, and that was the biggest trend. But that was during the lockdown. Then people came back to the office and the behaviors changed again. But here we actually faced the inflation. And what we observed was like a big increase in the ground coffee sales, as well as in the searches. At the same time, roasted coffee beans increased plus 21%, ground coffee plus 11%, and single serve capsules plus 12% year over year. That is telling us that consumers are looking for something more affordable comparing to the, for instance, coffee shop visits, which declined. And in parallel to that, what we also observed was that health was a growing concern, and it was like a totally independent from other macro trends, but also with some changes between the stated and declared behaviors. So that's on the macro level. When we were looking at very specific digital data points to see this macro context, one of the data points we looked at was just the app usage for the most popular coffee shops, loyalty apps. So whenever you look at the Starbucks app numbers or Dunkin' app number, you might be nearly 100% sure this is a customer that would be using this app being in the brick and mortar coffee shop because they're mostly used as the loyalty programs. So when we are tracking the app usage of all the coffee shops apps, we see actually like how people change their behavior, like will they visit the Starbucks for their favorite latte, or they will look for more affordable options. And right in the moment when the inflation was at the peak, which was in the spring, summer last year, there was a drop in the usage of these apps all over the coffee shop. So you can see that in June 22, it was at the lowest level. But then a couple of months later, inflation was going down, but all the products and services were still much more expensive than a year ago. The people came back to the coffee shop. So this is what you can see from January to March. And this is what we wanted to understand why it's happening. And we decided to take a group of our panelists and ask them some questions. So what we looked at was their financial situation. So we were asking them, what's your financial situation? How it has changed? And we very often were hearing, I'm struggling to buy even the basics I need. But sometimes we were hearing, I have enough money to buy whatever I need with some leftover. And then we crossed this with the Starbucks app usage. And what we found out actually that the vast majority of people who were saying they're struggling to even buy the basics were on the regular basis drinking their favorite latte in Starbucks. It was 75% of them. While within the group of people who were stating they have enough money, this share was significantly lower. It was only 57% of that group. What we should mention here, however, is like a significant difference between in the demographic profiles. So app users of Starbucks app are in majority young millennial, like Generation Z, young people, young generation. And the young generation usually was answering that they have no financial problems. So this is something also to take into account. Now, we knew that people are concerned about consuming coffee out of home. What we also found out from the studies was that usually families were much more oriented for the consumption at home versus at the coffee shops. So we were trying to focus on the group of customers that were consuming coffee mostly at home. And we were trying to understand what are the major trends that would be relevant for this group. And from the perspective of like a, more macro level trends, we saw 3 of them. It was like a superfood. So for people who were looking something more than coffee, something that was more positioned as a superfood. The second was convenience. That was either coffee concentrate or coffee pods. So something that will let us to prepare our favorite drink much faster at home, because we are too busy with, all the extra tasks we got from work, with the pressure to do more with less. And another trend we spotted was barista at home. So just to have similar experience to the one we can experience at the coffee shop, with the chai syrup, pumpkin puree, and other ingredients that are very, very characteristics for instance, type of coffees you could purchase in Starbucks. How we were looking at the data to really understand these 3 trends. So the base for that was the data on the on-site searches and product clicks. We were also looking at the Google searches, and we were trying to understand specifically what customers were searching for, what they were trying to buy, what they were looking for, mostly with the transactional, with the purchase intent. And we were looking at keywords, we were grouping the keywords. So for instance, whenever there was Javi, which was a brand for the coffee concentrate, or whenever people would write down just coffee concentrate, we were saying this is a trend about, having, a fast drink, maybe not prioritizing the taste so much, but having this drink made as fast as possible at home. Then we were looking at, for instance, the searches for the mushroom coffee, and also branded searches for specific brand rice mushroom coffee. And we also looked at this is a very significant trend. And then we put all these trends on the size and growth quadrant to understand which trends the brands should capitalize on. So as you can see, the mushroom coffee has quite enough size and still very good growth, which is around 200% year over year, which is an amazing trend to capitalize on. And why it's so great is also because when you position coffee as a superfood, it has a different job to be done in your life. So it's connected with a different willingness to pay, because you can pay much more for a superfood that is amazing for your health, for skin, that is an investment in yourself. It's not just, like your addiction, a fast drink to prepare. So the mushroom coffee was definitely super interesting trend. But the coffee concentrate was also an interesting one because it started to grow with incredible speed. It was at the level of over 1,000% growth year over year, which is also very important information to any company in the coffee business. And then, of course, you could go into the details of these searches, differentiate the branded from non-branded searches, trying to understand how strong this need is associated with already existing brands, and decide whether to maybe acquire the brand or maybe produce something similar or have a partnership. So there are many different actions that any brand could take based on these insights. Moving to the beauty industry, I will show you a totally different example. First, starting again from the very, very big picture. A year ago, I noticed CEO of Coty publishing that they see in Coty amazing fragrance effect. And the title was, "Forget the lipstick effect, this recession, it's a fragrance effect." Coty noticed like an increase in the fragrance sales. In the reports at the end of the year, it was around 10% year-over-year increase, which was really amazing number. When we were looking at our data, which we immediately did after reading this article, we saw that already at that time, there is significant growth in traffic for the entire beauty category, which is a great proxy of demand for beauty products. So we saw 7% year-over-year increase when we were looking in the autumn last year. And when we looked at it in the first quarter of 2023, we saw already 14% year-over-year increase. So so for sure, there are no doubts there is a beauty, the demand for beauty is increased. But at the same time, we checked the fragrance category specifically, wider in the web and on Amazon. And what we found out was that on Amazon, it was plus 38% year-over-year increase in the entire fragrance category, searches as well as the spend. So that was for us an interesting signal. And we were trying to understand why actually Coty had like a 10% growth, while we could see that this category on Amazon was growing much, much faster. And the answer to that was the trend of dupes. What is dupe? Dupe is the short version of a duplicate. It's a cheap alternative to premium or luxury product. So it's legal because it doesn't replicate the logo, but it's still replicating how the product looks like, how the product in the fragrances, like at the smell of the product. So that's just something that looks almost the same. And this trend exploded on TikTok. Of course, was mainly the leading generations for this trend was Generation Z and Generation Alpha. We spotted already that there are retailers who specialize in fragrance dupes, like Dossier.co was in our fastest growing ranking of D2C brands in beauty. That is just a retailer that has only or mostly fragrance dupes. So this trend definitely started in beauty, but right now it's also being extended to other categories, even consumer electronics. What's the scales? What's the size? This trend is already a significant one. The dupe hashtag on TikTok has been viewed over 5 billion times. We also see very significant number in the Google searches, which was 1.5 million in the last 12 months. We have been looking at the data just a week ago, so it's from August 23, last 12 months compared to year over year. And we only looked at it based on the top 1,700 keywords. So it's not even the entire scale of this trend. It's only the most popular keywords for this trend. So this trend is big. It's like the growth is absolutely insane. And what's quite interesting is that even the celebrity brands like Rare Beauty by Selena Gomez can't escape the dupes trend. So you could see that it's not only featured on TikTok, even Glamour would publish an article about the best Rare Beauty liquid blush dupe is only $8. So this is something that is already existing in the market and is taking the business away from the bigger brands. So now the question would be, what to do with this dupe trend? Like, does it undermine the sense of the brand building and influencer marketing, for instance? How the strategy should be changed in the context of the distribution, in the context of the product design, and last but not least, how brands should react faster to all the new trends, how they should adjust their strategy. So here, the great answer would be something that many started to name demand science. Demand science is data-based interpretation of keyword searches, on-site searches, as well as the custom categories traffic monitoring, and interpreting this data to understand what consumers are looking for right now, right here. So this is the live tracking of the trends, and we have already many early adopters that integrated this behavioral data into their insights and analytics just to complete the picture gathered from their first-party data, but also to forecast the trends and to inform distribution, product, and marketing teams much faster about what is the consumer demand. But it's not only about the trend spotting. What the most successful companies do is they monitor the unmet demand to disrupt the market and to deliver the products that would address the unmet demand. And one of the brands that is very successful in this strategy is the Inkey List. The Inkey List is direct-to-consumer brand, but already very well established. They have own D2C channel, but they also distribute their products through Amazon, through Selfridge, Look Fantastic, and other retailers. Their direct-to-consumer channel is, however, the leading one. This is the one to focus with very high growth. It's 98% year-over-year growth, for instance, in the UK. And the Inkey List tracks unmet demand and creates product to satisfy this demand for the very niche skin concerns. So, of course, they look at their own first-party data, both clickstream data as well as the voice of customer, but they complete the picture using Similarweb data, keyword searches, and also competitors' landscape to understand what is outside of their customer base, because this is where the brands grow, simply. So whenever there are any skin concerns that are very niche, but have significant number of searches, like for instance, for the hyperpigmentation, consumers are looking for hyperpigmentation treatment, how to remove dark spots, how to get rid of skin discoloration. So whenever the Inkey List spots that there is like a significant size or growth of these searches for this specific need, they create a product to address this. And you can have a look at their website. They have many products addressing more common skin concerns like wrinkles, acne, redness, but also more niche like hyperpigmentation. And you could really go into many more very, very small skin concerns, and how you could look at the data to try to replicate the strategy of the Inkey List is to compare the monthly search volume per skin concerns in Google, for instance, to the traffic share on your website specific segment. And the same for the competitors. So just to understand how you could meet the demand. And in particular, if you spot any dark spot blind spot in your product portfolio, you could size the trend, you could understand the growth to prepare the product that would answer this unmet consumer demand. And what's the best probably in this story is that it doesn't make sense to create dupe for the most niche products, because it only makes sense if it's like a really mass. So to sum up these two coffee and beauty stories, I will try to, give just 4 basic advices how the CPG brands could grow in turbulent times. First, for any CMI professionals, I would really advocate for combining the two methodologies with passive and declarative data, because that lets us to discover much more. Thinking about the mushroom coffee example, it always makes sense to redefine definition of your addressable market in the context of jobs to be done theory. So if coffee could be the superfood, this is the market to play. Let's forget about the coffee market. Let's think about the superfood market. Then the brand building activities and investments, I'm the biggest believer in the long-term brand building activities, but they should be for sure redefined thinking about the problem of dupes. Sometimes, dupes trend doesn't really mean a big threat for a brand in the longer term, because customers could just experience much worse products, could really see the difference why it's worth paying for the more expensive for the original one, because it's just not enough to replicate how the product looks like, but it's also important how the product really works, right? But this is also it will give us a different expectations in terms of the return on investment in our brand building activities, and we should for sure monitor who else is trying to capitalize on our investments. And at the same time, it probably makes sense to prioritize own direct-to-consumer channels, because in our own channels, our customers are not exposed to the white labels or to the dupes like it is happening in the marketplaces. And last but not least, taking this lesson from the Inkey List, micro demand tracking should be ideally embedded into our business model. So if we can create products much faster just to address the unmet customers' demand across the geographies, this is probably the way to compete nowadays, in particular against direct-to-consumer brands. That's all the insights I wanted to share with you today. And if there are no more questions, I would like to thank you all for the attention. You could connect with me on LinkedIn, follow up with any questions. You could also just send to your Similarweb contact a note. I'm happy to answer anything if it's gonna cross your mind a bit later. So thank you all, and wish you an amazing day. Thank you.